On the desolate shores of Namibia, where the relentless desert meets the unforgiving Atlantic, lies the infamous Skeleton Coast, a place where the sands are littered with the remnants of lost ships and the bones of those who dared to cross its treacherous waters. Among the many tales whispered by the wind, none is more chilling than the legend of the ghost ship of the Skeleton Coast. Centuries ago, during the height of the age of exploration, a grand Portuguese galleon named São Perdido set sail from Lisbon, laden with treasures destined for the New World. Its captain, Dom Rodrigo da Silva, was a seasoned navigator with a heart as cold as the gold he sought. With a crew of the bravest men and the finest cargo, the São Perdido seemed destined for glory. However, fate had other plans. As the ship rounded the treacherous Cape of Good Hope, it was caught in a violent storm. The tempest tossed the galleon mercilessly, and Dom Rodrigo, despite his experience, could not escape the fury of the sea. The ship was blown off course, far from the familiar trade winds, and into the perilous waters of the Skeleton Coast. As the storm subsided, the crew found themselves lost in a fog so thick it seemed like the breath of death itself. The galleon drifted aimlessly until, with a sickening crunch, it ran aground on the unforgiving sands. The crew scrambled to salvage what they could, but the desert was as merciless as the sea. One by one, the men succumbed to thirst and despair, their bones bleaching in the relentless sun. Don Rodrigo, consumed by his failure, refused to leave the ship. He cursed the sea, the sands, and the heavens, swearing that he would guard his treasure for all eternity. As he gave his last breath, a strange calm fell over the land. The fog lifted, revealing the São Perdido standing eerily upright, its sails tattered but intact, as if waiting for the wind to carry it away once more. The years turned into decades, and the legend of the São Perdido became a ghost story whispered among sailors and passed down through generations. But the tale was not just a story, it was a warning. Despite the dire fate of those who had gone before, there were always those who sought to claim the treasures said to be hidden aboard the phantom ship. Among these was a man named Captain Diego Valdez, a ruthless and ambitious Spaniard with a reputation for defying the odds. He had heard the stories of the Skeleton Coast and the lost galleon, and unlike the others, he was not deterred. To him, the ghost ship was not a cursed relic, but a prize waiting to be claimed. Driven by greed and the promise of unimaginable wealth, he assembled a crew and set sail for the dreaded coast. As they approached the Skeleton Coast, the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness. The waves seemed to pull back, as if the ocean itself feared the shores they were nearing. Captain Valdez stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the fog began to thicken like a shroud. The crew, seasoned and fearless, began to whisper among themselves, their confidence waning in the face of the ominous silence that surrounded them. Then, as if summoned by their dread, the ghostly outline of the São Perdido appeared through the mist. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The galleon looked untouched by time, its wooden hull gleaming faintly in the dim light. But there was something wrong, something otherworldly about the way it seemed to hover above the water, anchored not by chains, but by the will of the dead. Captain Valdez, undeterred, ordered his men to row out to the ghostly ship. As they neared, the air grew colder, and the fog seemed to close in around them, muffling the sounds of the ocean and the creaking of their own vessel. The closer they got, the more they could see, the tattered sails fluttering in a wind that did not exist, the broken masts standing like skeletal fingers pointing to the heavens, and the deck eerily deserted, yet filled with a presence that made the hair on their necks stand on end. When they finally boarded the ghost ship, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of decay and something far worse, fear. The crew, hardened pirates and mercenaries, found themselves trembling, their bravado fading with each step they took on the cursed wood. It was as if the ship was alive, breathing with the souls trapped within, watching them with unseen eyes. Captain Valdez led them to the captain's cabin, where he believed the treasure was hidden. The door creaked open, revealing a room untouched by time, yet filled with a heavy darkness. In the center of the room stood a chest, adorned with gold and jewels, the very treasure that had lured so many to their doom. Valdez's eyes gleamed with greed as he approached, his fingers itching to open the lid. As he touched the chest, the air around him grew icy, and the shadows seemed to move. From the corners of the room, ghostly figures began to emerge. The spectral forms of Don Rodrigo and his crew, their eyes hollow with an eternal rage. The crew of the ghost ship had risen to protect their treasure, bound by the curse that had claimed their lives. Panic seized Valdez's men as they tried to flee, but the ship would not let them go. The very wood beneath their feet seemed to shift and twist, trapping them in a labyrinth of horror. Valdez, clutching the chest, found himself face to face with the ghost of Don Rodrigo, whose voice echoed with the fury of the damned. "You have come to steal what is not yours," Don Rodrigo hissed, his voice like the wind howling through a graveyard. "But you will find no fortune here, only death." With that, the chest burst open, revealing not gold, but the rotting remains of those who had sought the treasure before. The sight drove Valdez to madness, and as he screamed, the ship began to sink, pulling him and his crew down into the depths of the skeleton coast sands. The next morning, when the fog lifted, there was neither trace of the ghost ship nor Valdez's ship. The skeleton coast had claimed them both, as it had so many before, but the legend did not end there. Sailors who ventured near the coast swore they could still hear the cries of the damned carried on the wind, and on nights when the moon was full, the ghostly galleon could be seen sailing along the horizon, its crew eternally searching for peace they would never find. To this day, the ghost ship of the skeletal coast remains a mystery, a story of greed, betrayal, and a curse that binds the soul of the lost. It serves as a reminder that some treasures are not meant to be claimed, and some places are best left undisturbed, lest the past reach out with ghostly hands to drag the living into the realm of the dead.